I want to talk to you a little bit about a man's life, his early life. I happened to see him on YouTube a while back, and he had written a book. And the YouTube interview was quite a few years ago, but I just saw it. Anyway, he had written a book, and it's called If You Doubt in God. And his name is Herbert Shearer. Herbert Shearer was drafted into the German army in 1942, right during the height of World War II. He was sent to the Russian front after getting some training. The world's worst place to go to battle, probably. Well, I'm not sure about that. Anyway, very, very bad situation. The Russians were on the offensive. The Germans were retreating. They were in disarray at times. Sometimes the men were on their own, every man for himself. Well, in late 1943, he'd been there quite a while, and they kept retreating back. He was wounded, so he got a chance to go home. The German army doctor said, "Yep, you're on the medical train out of here." So he was sent home, recuperated in a hospital, and he got a brief time with his family before, guess what? You're going to the Russian front. Well, he knew it before he went to see his family. And when he left his family, he said it was the hardest farewell he has ever said, or been through, because he was pretty sure he wasn't coming back. He'd seen all the carnage, all the death, all the horror that was happening on the Russian front. So off he went in tears. He got to the Russian front, even more disarray, even more struggles. So in mid-1944, after he'd been there once again for quite a while, backing up, him and a few of his comrades were captured by the Russians. They'd gotten disconnected with part of their company, and like I say, a lot of it was, you're on your own, fellas. So he was captured, and he thought, well, this is the end. The Russians aren't going to want to deal with this. They'll just execute us right here. Well, they didn't. They said, okay, you're going on a 3-day march down to where the railroad is. Your provisions are what you have on you, which is just a little bit of food and a little bit of bread. They didn't have much because the German army was really struggling to get food and supplies to their men. So they walked 3 days, boarded up on a train. Boarded up on a train. And there were a number of other Germans there too, because it was a whole trainload of Germans heading across Russia. They didn't know where they were going. But they soon surmised that it was Siberia. Sure enough, after many weeks being cooped up in this rail car, well, they were let out on occasion. They get a little bit of food, a little bit of water. And the only thing they had in the rail car, there was no straw, no nothing. It was just boards and a hole in the floor. A hole in the floor to do your business. Well, they finally made it to Siberia, and his struggles were just beginning. But you know what? In everything that happened, he looked to God. He said, God, if you want me to survive this, you'll help me survive. If you want me to die here, I'll die here. But I know you exist. That's what he kept coming back to. And the conditions in Siberia were just atrocious. And men were dying like flies. They'd dig a hole in the ground and put logs over it for a shelter. That was shelter. They just had their German clothes, their summer clothes. They didn't even have winter clothes. And their shoes were wearing out. They weren't equipped for Siberian winter. Well, finally, they did get some clothing. The Russians brought some heavier clothing for winter. But they had to go out every day, cut firewood, do this, do that. Whatever it was that the Russians wanted, they were slave labor. Food, very little food, just watery soup and a few crumbs of bread once a day. That was it. So this went on for months and months. But when summertime came, they would help plant the fields a little bit as best they could, with no tools, all by hand. Fall came, they would dig potatoes. They said, we don't have anything to dig potatoes with. They said, go out in the woods, get a stick. You're going to dig potatoes with a stick. Well, at least the potatoes were food. And they would eat them raw. But they had to hide it from the Russians. Because the Russians caught you eating it, who knows, really bad. So they would sneak eating potatoes. Well, eventually he got a job in a factory, a small little factory, making furniture and making, I don't know, bookcases or something. And they found out in the summer they could glue, they were gluing things together. They found out that they could eat the glue. So they'd take a little bite of glue once in a while. He actually said he gained a little bit of weight eating the glue. But the struggles just continued on. In wintertime, there was no heat in the factory. None. And they still had to produce this stuff. But they had to nail it together because the glue wouldn't work in freezing weather. So they had to make their own nails. They had to get a piece of wire and make their own nails. It was just on and on and on. Well, eventually, in 1948, after almost everybody in that camp had died, and he had nearly died a number of times, they said, sure, you're going home. And so then he got lined up with everybody that was going home that was left, and he wasn't on the list. It turned out they'd spelled his name wrong. So anyway, he got out of there. They had to walk, 20 kilometers or something to a railroad site where they could get loaded in boxcars once again with a hole in the floor. But this time at least there was straw on the floor. There was some straw on the floor. It took them 4 weeks to travel all the way across Russia in a boxcar. But they made it. Now this is in the fall. It wasn't warm weather. It's getting cold. They finally made it. More trials and more issues, but I won't go into all the details. There's too many details. But anyway, made it to West Germany. He got off the train. The American Army met him. Said, come with us. We've got barracks for you, and we've got food for you to eat. They couldn't believe it. They walked in to a mess hall, and there were a table and chairs. There was silverware, there were plates, there were napkins, there was coffee. But the thing was, they couldn't eat it. They were starving. When you're starving, you can only take little morsels of this and that to bring yourself back from this horrid fast that he had been on for all these years with very, very little nutrition. But he said he sat there and he just cried. He cried. He said, I just can't believe it. Well, eventually, he made his way all the way home. And it took him a while. It took a long time, in fact, he said, to really recover. He would just go for walks in the woods and thank God all the time for surviving Siberia. Finally, he married, and he said, I just can't stay here. I cannot stay in Germany. He didn't really say why, but he just said, I've got to go somewhere else. And so he immigrated to Canada in 1956 and became a cabinet maker in Canada and lived out the rest of his days. But what kept him going was he knew a few scriptures, and he always looked to God. He didn't look to man. He looked to God to bring him through all this. And one of the scriptures that he remembered was John 14, verse 1. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. And I'm not sure that's all he had in the book. But the rest of it says, and he might have remembered part of this. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again. I will come again. Another one of the promises. I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may also be. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. And we do, don't we, brethren? We know our part of fulfilling this promise that God and Jesus Christ have made to us. But that was a big scripture to him. And he had a few other scriptures too. But this was big. This was really huge. And as we know, God does keep his promises. As Paul says in Titus 1, verse 2, God does not lie. He certainly doesn't, does he, brother? He never lies to us. And he keeps his promises. And as times get worse and worse here in the future, how soon will these promises of Jesus Christ return? How soon will they come into play? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe a time for a while yet. It may take a while. Maybe sooner. I don't know. But we do know that Jesus Christ is returning. And we have to do our part. And part of that is just remembering his promises. And living by his laws and his truth. So, brethren, in closing, let's go over to Revelation 22. Revelation 22. Very book at the back of the book. And we know by the end of Revelation, we have won. Not ourselves, but Jesus Christ and God has brought us to his kingdom. And brethren, love and charity and peace will reign. But what does Jesus Christ say here? Verse 12 of Revelation 22. And behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to give to everyone according to his works. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. And then dropping down to verse 20, he says, surely I am coming quickly. I hope so, brethren. I hope he's coming quickly. And I do hope as things get worse and worse, and they will, that we look to God and his promises, knowing that no matter what happens, he has a place for you and me in his kingdom. I pray we'll be there soon. So, brethren, have a wonderful Sabbath. Love you all. Hope to see you all soon.